Hey, this is Steve with A Nobody Gospel. When I was 3, my father and I were driving somewhere. I think we were driving to my grandmother's house because we passed over the Tennessee River. We were living in Florence, and it was a fall day, I think, because the leaves were orangey and red. But it must have been early fall because the grass was still green. It was absolutely gorgeous that day. And we were driving over the Tennessee River Bridge, going into Sheffield, and I love that that view. And I still enjoy that view every chance I get to go over that view and see the Tennessee River and the cliffs along the Sheffield side. It was beautiful, breathtaking. And I asked Dad, why, or not why, but uh, where did the world come from? And of course, being a good Southern Baptist pastor's son, he said, well, it came from God. God created all this, Steve. A few minutes later, I said, Daddy, well, who created God? We create stories that try to define why we're here and how we got here. I mean, that's a nagging question. Scientists do it also. I was watching Lawrence Krauss video a few months ago, and Lawrence Krauss was explaining how if you give nothing enough time and space, how that nothing would necessarily create something. Well, that sounds like nonsense to me. But when I'm really honest, that other story of that God created it kind of seems like nonsense too, because it leaves as many questions as it does answers. Probably a lot more questions than it does answers. I mean, we can't wrap our head around an eternal being. It just can't be done. So when I say that I'm an atheist, though I don't really like labels, I think we would do a lot better if we get rid of our labels. But when I do have to identify myself in my belief system, I would say that I'm an atheist. But what do I mean by that? What I mean is that I've rejected all concepts of God that I've heard of thus far. I'm not saying that there's not a God. The only way that I could prove that there's not a God is if I was present in all the universe at the same time. And I've searched the universe through my being and discovered that there's no God. Of course, the problem with that would be that I would be God. And some of y'all would be in real trouble. But so I'm not saying there is no God. I just reject all the concepts of God that I've experienced so far. As I was going through this deconstruction, I began to realize that I've had a lot of gods that I worship, even though uh, I claimed them all to be a Christian God. But the God of my youth was totally different than the God that I worshiped 10 years ago. It was a totally different being. And the God that I worshiped 10 years ago was a devil compared to the last God I worshiped. They were not the same being. I'm sure you may have experienced those same experiences. That's the reason we have so many denominations, is because people have so many different beliefs of God, even within Christianity. Well, when I was a youth, one of the I'm gonna give some advice to some Christians now. When I was a youth, one of the rhetorics that I heard was that, and proofs of Christianity is that you never hear of you hear of an atheist becoming a Christian a lot, but you never hear of a Christian becoming an atheist. Well, I believed that propaganda, and I would take that to the street. I mean, I did street evangelism, and I would evangelize at church, school. I was doing the Christian thing, and I would hear people say, "Well," I would use that rhetoric, and somebody would come back and say, "Well, how about Sam Dennison?" For those that don't remember Sam Dennison, he was a former Baptist pastor that became an atheist comedian, pretty raunchy atheist comedian, but he became an atheist comedian. So I would take that information back to my youth group, and one of the youth group leaders would always say, well, he was never a Christian to begin with. That's why he rejected the faith, because he was never a Christian. As I begin to tell my story, that may be the rhetoric you believe, but that I was never a Christian to begin with. And if that's what you believe, I guess nobody's stopping you from believing that. But when you tell your youth that, and then they're faced in the real world with something that contradicts that, they're going to question everything else you say. So you may want to avoid that. But we want to know why we're here and how we got here. The good news is nobody knows. We have the day. Let's make meaning for the day. See you next time.